Creative power is what moves the world, and Creative Conversations with Irene is a podcast series that offers insight and inspiration on how to thrive in the core essence of who you are as a woman. I'm your host, Irene Chong, and it thrills my heart to see more women awaken and come alive to your feminine intelligence. Listen in for soul and strategy to create your best life ever. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us on social media to receive updates on new episodes. Welcome, Baljit. Now, when I was conceptualizing my podcast and thinking about the kind of conversations I would like to have, you came to mind because I was introduced to you through a mutual friend. And then you were also a speaker on my first summit, where as a certified sexologist and tantra practitioner, you spoke about the importance of our sexual life force energy. But I also know that you do a lot of other things as well, and it all feels very creative to me, how you've combined your passions and interests into the work that you do now. And I'm pretty sure that for a lot of women who are watching or listening to this, they also feel this desire to step more fully into their gifts. So since we didn't get to talk about some of your other interests, for instance, the work that you do as a DJ, I thought we could start there. So let's just begin with me asking you, how did you start to DJ and what was your experience like?
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for having me. Starting off DJing, it all happened in 2010. I self-taught. I had a friend who had also teach me how to DJ, and he had this book with Dr. David R. Hawkins called Power versus Force. And he showed me the different levels of consciousness with certain tracks, certain songs, and how a song can make you feel angry or a song can make you feel happy, and really looking at the different levels of consciousness. So we used to like muscle test and create DJ sets that was at a certain level of consciousness that didn't, I think it was like above 200 or higher. So it was like courage and above. And so above courage would be like, I think it was like acceptance and love and happiness and bliss. And then I was just like a closet DJ. I didn't really tell a lot of people. I did a few parties, and then I decided to learn how to DJ professionally. So I went to DJ school in 2012 and 13. And this was like while I was still running my full-time business. I just felt this urge to be more creative and learn how to create mixes. And at the time, I had already done a few planetarium events in a dome, facilitating sacred geometric images and ambient electronic music, like really taking people on a journey. But I was like, oh, there's a missing piece. Like, I feel like I need to build my confidence in playing music. And I was still in the closet with DJing. And then it wasn't until like 2016, 17, where a dear friend of mine, who's also a DJ producer, encouraged me to really put myself out there. And she hooked me up with the studio from this amazing person. He's just a wonderful soul. And he is also a DJ producer, but he had all the gear, like the DJ gear, like the standard gears that you would use in the clubs, so that I can like learn and practice and really build my confidence. And that's how I started to get asked to do more gigs. And since then I've done a few mini festivals and whatnot. But the intention with the DJing, especially when it hit like 2018, was to take people on a journey. Like I really wanted to create mixes for people where it inspired them and motivated them. It would get them through the day. So I had a person from Spain. He has a podcast, a music podcast on SoundCloud. And he listened to one of my SoundCloud sets. Like I barely had any listeners on my SoundCloud. And he was like, can you do a DJ set for me? And he had a really big list. a lot of listeners. And so I said, sure. And so I did that in 2018. And then it just created this ripple effect of other international podcasts, music podcasts that were asking me for mixes. So I've been creating hour to 90-minute mixes for different podcasts globally, and been getting a lot of feedback from people who, you know, feel inspired, or they feel like it just shifted them and they got so much work done, because the way that I create the mixes is that I really infuse a lot of intention in it. And I really, I don't necessarily like calibrate muscle test the way that I used to, but I intuitively feel that, does this lift me up? Does this inspire, or does it distract or bring someone down? And if it does, I won't put it in the set. So yeah, and then I've started producing as well, creating my own tracks. So I released a track in 2022 called Destiny, and currently working with a mentor to help me expand more on doing live gigs, and also producing more tracks.
Well, so that's amazing, Baljit. And first off, congratulations, because
Thank you.
it sounds like there's just been this huge expansion of your passion in DJing. And there was something that you said at the beginning that really piqued my interest. And I was just wondering, like going back to that time when you were a closet DJ, when you had this keen interest, but you were so shy and you didn't dare to step up. And then you mentioned that you slowly started taking baby steps and, just growing into your creativity. So I'm just kind of curious and wondering, what were some of the things you did or you said to yourself when you were just starting out, so that you didn't just give up, or so that you didn't just remain a closet DJ for the rest of your life, right? What were some of the inspirations that came your way that enabled you to create the amazing DJ life that you have now?
Yeah. It takes a lot of courage, but I find that when you're around other creative people that also encourage you, like, community is really important. So if you are interested in DJ, or interested in creating music and other things, then find the community that does something similar, because that's what motivated me. And then I did hire a mentor. I've hired a few mentors actually, to help me build my confidence, and to nudge me, like, get me out of the closet per se. And it's almost like, as an artist, it's like your own precious creative gift that you're like launching out into the world. And sometimes we don't want to really share that, because we're afraid of what's going to happen, or maybe it's performance anxiety or whatever it is. But then when you really like take that risk and really come from the heart, and know that, no matter what, like, you are being a conduit for your own gift, the people will come forward. And that's what happened with me. I just started to connect with other people that were DJs, and just kind of naturally asked me. And you do have to make an effort as well to connect. So it really is like taking the leap and going in the direction. Maybe it's hiring a mentor. Maybe it's, definitely community is really important, because when you don't have community, you're not going to get feedback as well. And you're not going to know, you're just not going to know where you want to go. Like, I find the community is just really important.
Beautiful. You're speaking to my heart right there, Baljit. And I really want to echo what you shared there, the importance of community, surrounding yourself with people who also have the same interest, who will be encouraging and nurturing and supportive. I think that bit is so essential. And also receiving support in the form of either hiring a coach or a mentor. I also feel that when we want to create, first we have to receive, right? So that's what the container is about. And I do feel that this is something that I know I personally and a lot of women that I work with face. They don't feel worthy and deserving to receive. So I'm thinking small steps like joining I don't know, like if it's a hobby or an interest group, something where it doesn't feel too daunting or intimidating, where people just have a passion or an interest and you can get together and learn from each other. And then the other piece that you said, I love that, right? That yes, creating takes a lot of courage to be an artist, whether it be music or art or just being the artist creator of your own life. I think it takes a lot of courage. You have to be willing to take risks, to try new things, to experiment. And when you mentioned courage, I just kept thinking, yeah, that's cœur, right? Heart. It's French for heart. And you were talking about how you decided that you had to do this because you wanted to be that channel and that conduit. And so that brings me to the next piece that I'm very, very intrigued by, which is, early on, you had also mentioned how in the music that you do and DJing, you started out because you had read a book. And for listeners who are not aware, there's this whole spectrum of consciousness on a scale, right? I think anger and sadness and loneliness, that's like on one end, and the other end is joy, bliss, ecstasy. So it's about being able to shift states of consciousness. And music, it is a very powerful tool to just help lift our spirits when we're feeling down. So I'm really curious because you mentioned how you tap onto your intuition. And to me, intuition and creativity, they kind of go hand in hand. So I want to ask you to speak more into this element of tapping into your intuition when you are creating a DJ set. What are some of your inspirations? Where do you draw your downloads from?
Yeah, absolutely. How I started to get really in tuned with really understanding the consciousness, the different levels of consciousness and music and vibration was, I had a cousin that was part of the nightlife. So I'd always go to watch different DJs perform. And this was like back in like 2009 to probably 2014. I was really a big part of the nightlife. So I would watch the DJ perform, and I would watch the dance floor, and I would notice when the DJ would switch to a different track, a different song, either people stayed on the dance floor or they would go, go get a drink or go to the washroom. And I'm like, oh, something shifted. Like they kind of got bored, or you started to see when the dance floor would go quiet and people would move away. And then when the DJ would switch to a different song, how everyone would come back in and they wouldn't stop moving. And I started to really intuitively feel, oh, this is how it feels like when the energy drops in a song or when the energy picks back up. And so that's how I really started to build my intuition. And I was completely sober as well. Like a lot of people who go to clubs aren't usually sober. I never drank. I always had a bottle of water. And that was just by choice because of the work that I was doing and teaching the Akashic Records and whatnot. Like I wanted to keep my energy at the highest that it could be. And so that's how I really started to enhance my intuition with feeling when the energy drops or when it picks up with a track. And that's how I now know when I'm listening to a track, I can actually intuitively feel the state that the person was in when they're creating a track. And so if they were really depressed or, very low vibe, I'll feel it. Even if it's a good song, I'll actually feel the actual energetic and the emotion that is actually coming from the person who created the song. So I really, after all these years, really fine tune and develop that level of intuition and awareness of creating a DJ set. Cause then I'm like, who's the artist and, what kind of mood were they in? I can usually tell, or it just like, you can feel it in the song. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I love this piece that you're speaking into, which is, when I think about creativity and creation, a lot of it actually has to do with observation, noticing.
Yeah.
So I guess the analogy that I can think of is, an artist, like a fine artist, when we're learning to draw or to paint, there's a lot of observation of, what's going on in life. It's about noticing, sharpening your skills of awareness. And it sounds like that's what you did. And I'm just thinking, in terms of, say, because as you know, this podcast series is all about inspiring women to co-create the beautiful life that they desire, even before they start to create. One of the things that they can do, and which is why I love that you brought this up, is to just notice, to find role models even of perhaps women, people that they admire, that inspire them, that light them up, and think about the qualities that they embody, and then use that as a springboard, as a platform to inspire them in dreaming up, in creating the kind of life that they want. I also love how you spoke to that level of intuition, because it is a skill that can be developed. And it sounds like, over time with practice, the more you became aware, the more you also experimented in your own sense, you're now able to almost have this telepathic connection. And this is where I would like to go next, because moving on from DJ to Akashic Records, even though I'm seeing patterns and connections there, right? It seems like two very different modalities, but yeah, at the same time, it's we're talking about vibration and frequency and tapping into a higher source of inspiration. It is actually one and the same. So I'd love to hear you speak more. Now, Akashic Records is a term that I've heard a lot. I've also heard it expressed in different ways. So I'd love to hear your take on what the Akashic Records are and how you got into learning about them in the first place.
Oh, yeah. The Akashic Records is when my life like literally transformed. And this was back in 2005. And so the Akashic Records are the records of your soul. It records every word, thought, action, event. I like to call it like an etheric library, and we each have our own etheric library. And when we are needing guidance, like maybe we want to create something in our lives and it's not happening. Maybe we want to call in a relationship. Maybe we're having relationship issues, or maybe there's some soul contracts that we're not too sure if they're complete. It could be health issues, could be absolutely anything. You can actually access with proper training and knowing how to ask the questions. You can access the Akashic Records and be able to clear any limiting programming. And it literally works on the theta brainwave state to help you shift those limiting patterns, and then you can reprogram to and basically what I mean reprogram, it's basically aligning back to your truth, the universal truth, which is the truth of all that is. And so that started after I had this awakening in 2005, after coming out of this shell of depression and having a panic disorder. And that got initiated when I was taking these homeopathic remedies, because homeopathy is energy medicine. And somehow I went to this numerology class because I was just like awakening, and I was like, I need to find out more of this new energy stuff. Show me everything. And I came across my dear friend and mentor at that time, who was teaching numerology, but on the side, she was doing Akashic Records. And at the time, she wasn't even teaching it. So I had a session from her, and it just changed my life. Like it's very different from a psychic reading. So a psychic will tell you one trajectory. But the reality is we have many trajectories, and we can choose the least joyous path, the mediocre path, or the most joyous path. And what I realized is that I was going to a lot of psychics, but I was deferring my power over to the psychic to tell me my future, versus me being able to shift a programming within inside myself to create what it is that I desire. And because I kept deferring my power of like, when am I going to get married? Is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? I was desperate for answers, but I kept deferring my power and I wasn't shifting. I was a victim to my own reality. So when you're actually working in the Akashic Records, you're taking personal responsibility and stepping into this place of empowerment versus the victim state. And then by choice, you have the choice to be a conscious co-creator. And even if you don't listen and you still receive the guidance, the universe will guide you. Maybe it's going to be a 4x4 for you to learn the lessons. but you'll still learn whatever it is that you've come to learn. But yeah, it's a very profound tool. It's what really initiated everything for me.
Mm. Well, first, I always love hearing about people's awakening and transformational journeys. And it inspires and also reminds me of my own path. Um, for me, it was taking out Reiki. So I resonate a lot with what you said, like undergoing this deep unsatisfaction that resulted in depression. Um, and for me, it was, I was just like, I was crying in the middle of the night and I wasn't sure why. And it was like, I just knew that something was wrong. And that was what kickstarted me on my journey. So it's interesting
Wow.
that we have this similarity and that we both turned to energy medicine. So
Yeah.
same for me, like when I became initiated and took on Reiki, I started sensing this new energy that in your words, and I started wanting to learn everything that I could. And now that you're talking about the Akashic records and your understanding of it, it actually got me wondering. So you mentioned like deferring your power to psychics versus taking on responsibility and control over your life, right? By consulting this beautiful etheric library of resource and inspiration. I know that, for example, there are other modalities like people turn to angels or archangels or maybe their own spirit guides and they connect or they channel. What would you say are the differences between, say, seeking downloads from your spirit guides versus tapping into the Akashic records?
That's a really great question. And, even with psychics, like I have quite a few psychic friends that at least guide, they're not like the typical fortune teller people. So at the time, I was going to the fortune teller people to tell me my future. Um, and so, in regards to working with other guides, like ascended masters as well, in the end, for me personally, I like to receive guidance directly from like my higher self. Um, and I do connect with Saint Germain a lot. He comes through before I go to bed. He'll kind of give me the play, or sometimes if I'm in the bathtub just taking a bath, he'll just come and sit down. And it was just like so random, but I'll get guidance. And I sit with it and then I notice it actually happens. So in the end, I really do feel it's important to be very discerning with who and what you are channeling as well. Um, and and with that discernment, um, because there's also, I'll call it like false light, where it's like you think you're channeling someone benevolent, but they're actually not benevolent. It's more malevolent, or you can tell that someone's not in their body when they're being a conduit. Um, and so discernment is very, very much needed. And also with channeling other beings, like the timelines are different too. Like I've noticed that the timelines or just how things are shared is really expansive to how it's compared to the human reality. So there might be some things that are a little off, or um, and so that's why going back to the Akashic Records, it's like you're just going back to your etheric library that has all the information. And sometimes you might get visitors, you might get your guides that come in to assist along with your Akashic Records. Or even it could be someone that has crossed over. If they're meant to serve the purpose of your question, for example, I had someone, and it's happened more than once, where someone wanted to know why they weren't fulfilling their mission. And all of a sudden their loved one who's crossed over will appear like a sibling. And it's like, oh, you're not allowing yourself to live your life because your sibling passed away. And so that's why they have come over to share the message. Um, so there's a reason why if someone is being guided to channel someone, um, but it requires a lot of discernment. And that's why I love working the records, because you're just It's like your higher self. That's basically who you're working with, and your oversoul. And I don't know, I just find it's like the purest for me.
Thank you for pointing out that piece about discernment, because, as I think as the world is awakening up to different realms of consciousness, and there's this growing interest, there can also be a lot of, I can't remember the term that you said, but a lot of like malevolent energies that disguise themselves as benevolent. So this ability to be able to trust and discern. And also the way I see it is there are so many pathways to opening up to higher states of consciousness. Depending on your personality, your experience, your karma, right? Different opportunities will come your way. So not to say that there's only like one right path to choose. There's so many options. There's so much diversity. I think it's actually really fun and interesting to have conversations with people who do different things. Like I know for myself, I definitely tap into intuitive channels, but what I do is astrology readings. So I have, there's the technical aspect of looking at a chart, looking at the natal positions and the planets and all that. And then there's also that higher guidance that I receive from my guides, and also from tapping into records to see my clients' soul blueprint. And so I really enjoy that. And I know for other people, for example, maybe they do human design, or, like it's just so many, just this wide spectrum. Even within astrology, there's Vedic astrology, Sidereal and all of that. So, just to say that, as I imagine that as you're creating your life, right? And as you have shared it in your story, things came your way. You started out by taking a numerology workshop, and then that led you down the path to Akashic Records. And I'm sure along the way, you also picked up other modalities. But then what aligned with you, and I love the word they use. I love the fact they use the word alignment, aligned, right? You chose what aligned best with you, with your energy, and then you just went with it. So that sounded really, really beautiful. The other piece, you said something that also spoke to my heart, and I would like to come back to that, which is, you were sharing about trusting, tuning into your to this universal source. And I'm just wondering, like, what are some of the ways in which you apply it? You mentioned, for example, some of your guides come through when you're in the bath, when you're just about to go to sleep. I love that. It's almost like you're just having a daily conversation with divinity, right? And actually, when you think about it, creativity, I always see creativity as actually divinely inspired messages that then propel you to take inspired action. So share more a little bit about how you cultivate this relationship whereby you receive these downloads from your guides, from spirit.
Well, working in the records, like of, so many people over the last years, it's kind of like a practice as well. Like as I'm working in the records of others, like my intuition just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And then what I normally do for myself almost every day, like first thing in the morning, I'll have my cup of coffee, and then I like to just briefly open up my Akashic Records and ask, what my intentions are for the day, or what's the focus, so that I'm not being distracted by other things that may take away from what my actual aligned focus is, like what I actually need to get done, and what feels, I want to say divine, like meaning I'm not doing it because I think I should do it. It's actually, no, this actually needs to get done because this for whatever reason needs to happen. And whenever I follow that, it all makes sense. I like save more time and energy that way. So, waking up in the morning and just feeling into your body, it's like, what do I want to focus on today? Like, I know I have my client calls or whatever, I have to go to work, but how do I want to show up? And I also like to set my intentions as well. I like to set my intentions that I'm grounded in my power and my truth, so that I'm in my body having this experience. To really deeply connect to your intuition, you also have to be embodied, where there's a lot of people that kind of leave their body and they're not necessarily channeling or being a conduit for the right kind of information. So when you're more in your body, it could be like when you're working out, or I get a lot of downloads in the shower, could be on the toilet. Like it's just because you're just moving energy. And then all of a sudden you just have this aha moment. That's your intuition that's speaking to you because you're in this space where you're not having any distractions. So that's really important. Or even if it's you're lying in bed by yourself, or you're with your loved one, but you have your energy to yourself and you can really connect. So there's different ways of doing that, but embodying like being in your body is very important.
You've just given us a whole slew of tips right there. And I
Yeah.
think my key takeaway really is that, you know what, creativity, it doesn't just come. It's really a practice. And there's a discipline and a routine, and you get better at it. The more you do it, the more you fine tune and refine. It's almost like then it will just flow. So on that note, I actually want to end off with a question. And I thought we've talked a lot about a lot of abstract conceptual stuff, which I
Yeah.
love. But I also want to sort of bring it down to, and get you to share a story, like a recent experience, in which perhaps in going through life and navigating the complexities and challenges that come our way, and that may sometimes throw us off a little bit. Right? Can you think of
Yeah.
like a recent story where this something happened to you, and how did you get back on track, ground yourself to embody yourself again so that you can tap into that well of creativity that is always there?
Hmm. Um, oh, that's such a great question. I did have something that happened, but I can't really say too much about it, but it really threw me off. Like my nervous system was a little tweaked out, and then I really felt like when something like that happens, it could be like a death of a loved one or a relationship, or maybe it's just like something that really jolted your nervous system. Um, I found that there was such a gift in that. When you get thrown off so far, or not even far, it's like you get thrown off and on your path, or you're like, ooh, that kind of hurt. And then you're like, well, what was that for? And what is it that I really needed to look at? And so the lesson for me out of that was having really good energetic boundaries, and um, no longer buffering. And what I mean buffering is I had I've shared it in our last interview that I was a certified people pleaser. And I left that certification go. Um, but I noticed that there was still this aspect of me people pleasing and holding space or buffering in relationships, um, and even platonic relationships as well, and how that really impacted my creativity, how that really frustrated me on a human level, and just really I got to this point of irritation of like, okay, I'm feeling irritated. So this is a sign that I'm on the precipice of something big.
Mm.
And I had this major aha moment of, not only was I buffering, uh, friendships and relationships for couples and like weird dynamics, it was also on a very energetic level as well, where I would somehow get triangulated in a situation and somehow had to buffer and be the peacemaker. And I was like, that's not my job. Like, how can I, in our womb is the creativity, it's the nurturing. So I saw how there was so many cords, not so many, but still some cords that were attached into that nurturing aspect of the womb, and people feeling safe around me. But it was like my need as well. I was like, wow, like, why do I keep doing this? So it was a really big lesson for me and a really huge shift. And this was, recent over the past couple of months or so. And even the last month, it was like the same pattern showed up. And as that shifted, something in the creativity piece and even with the DJing started to really like amp up. And this is as of recent. So I started to see the parallel of like, oh, like this needed to happen where I had this breakdown where I said to myself, enough is enough. And it created this opening for my creativity, but also to be seen as well.
Wow. You just touched on a subject that I'm super passionate about, boundaries. Um, but coming back to my earlier question, I just want to give some reflection, which I think is something that you did really well here, which is when a challenging situation comes your way, you are able to drop into deeper inquiry and ask yourself. I know for me that in the past, if I were to face a challenging circumstance, and sometimes it's hard, like when you're really down in the dumps, sometimes, like it used to be, I would ask myself the question, what is wrong with me? What am I doing? And then I realized that that was a very disempowering way of looking at my life. So the question that you had posed was, what is the lesson here for me? What am I meant to learn? I think that switching of the questioning alone can open up an entire different trajectory with which to view the situation. And you're also talking a lot about reframing and shifting perspectives here. So for you, you dropped into deeper inquiry, which I think is also really, really helpful, to have that capacity to reflect and then to put up strong boundaries. I love what you said, where, in creativity, it's not just about opening yourself up to like intuition and divine downloads. A huge part of it is also about maintaining strong boundaries, saying no to people and things so that you can say yes to yourself, to co-create the life that you do want.
Yeah.
And then that actually, got me thinking, and I realized that it ties everything very nicely as we wrap up our conversation here. Because one of the things that I like to do when I'm facing a challenging situation, I do the self-reflective piece as well. But sometimes when I know I just need to shift my state and I'm out and I'm still doing lots of things, one of the things that I do turn to is music. And I love listening to solfeggio frequencies. Like it calms me down. It definitely soothes my nervous system. And it's also a reminder that there is this universal consciousness that is there to support me in living my life, in actualizing my potential. Yeah, so just to say, Baljit, I've just gained tons of insights and inspiration from this conversation. And I know that our viewers/listeners will also benefit and gain a lot from our time together today. So on that note, I just want to say a huge thank you for being here with me and having this little chat.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a joy.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and that you'll be taking away nourishing gems to create a more joyful and fulfilling life, because that's what it's all about. If you liked what you heard, do give a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. And I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and let me know your takeaways and reflections. Till next time, remember to light up the world with your beauty and creativity.